Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Sean Diddy Combs walked into the Manhattan courtroom expecting a standard step in jury selection, but within minutes had the entire gallery stirred, joking about Combs' many stage names and even comparing the juror questionnaire to an extended cut of Lord of the Rings. Laughter echoed through the room. Court reporters raced for pull quotes, and Combs, expressionless behind wire-rimmed glasses, became the subject of the day's sharpest courtroom jab. But beneath the humor, serious tension filled the air. Before a single juror took an oath, Combs was staring down the beginning of what may be the most high-stakes legal fight of his life. On May 5th in Manhattan, federal prosecutors launched their case, anchored by 5 felony charges, 2 linked to trafficking-related allegations, 2 for transporting individuals for unlawful purposes, and 1 conspiracy count. The government claims Combs led a years-long scheme fueled by intimidation, expensive gifts, and cross-state travel.
Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
Authorities say the alleged operation was designed to pressure or lure young women into exploitative situations that ultimately boosted Combs' brand and generated profits for his companies. The indictment paints a picture of a network hidden behind shell companies, staffers, and strict non-disclosure agreements. Prosecutors argue that the entire structure shielded serious misconduct from public view, while enabling the accused behavior to continue undetected. Combs, now 55, has pleaded not guilty to all counts. He maintains that any intimate encounters mentioned in the case were entirely consensual. However, a conviction on the most serious charges could mean life in prison, in addition to forfeiting real estate, luxury vehicles, and rights to music royalties. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Collins told the court that evidence would show a consistent coercive pattern of behavior. She stated that jurors would examine financial records, travel logs, and live testimony connecting the accused conduct to a coordinated enterprise. Defense attorney Benjamin Brafman pushed back, claiming prosecutors were twisting adult relationships and lifestyles into a criminal narrative. In pretrial motions, he said the case was built more on speculation and rivalry than on solid evidence.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95, that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
The 5-count indictment was unsealed in February after a year-long grand jury investigation, which reportedly used sealed civil lawsuits, internal company communications, and extensive phone metadata. The indictment alleges that Combs used private jets, luxury yachts, and tour buses to transport individuals across state lines, sometimes under the guise of modeling contracts or music video opportunities. 2 of the trafficking-related charges involve alleged use of force, fraud, or coercion in incidents prosecutors say occurred between 2016 and 2020.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So
you say you know he's innocent?
The transportation charges cover separate trips to cities like Miami, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, where Combs allegedly arranged hotel stays and hired security teams that, according to the government, restricted the complainant's freedom of movement and personal autonomy. The conspiracy charge ties these alleged acts together under what federal prosecutors describe as an organized exploitation network. By labeling it an enterprise, the government can introduce broader evidence of coordination and intent beyond the 5 main charges outlined in the indictment. Court documents name 3 primary complainants, listed only by their initials.
And that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things, into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something.
Prosecutors also suggest that at least 8 more witnesses are expected to testify, offering additional insight into the alleged operations and behaviors surrounding Combs' business and personal conduct. A sealed filing reveals that singer-songwriter Cassie Ventura, who previously reached a civil settlement with Combs, has been subpoenaed and may testify as a rebuttal witness, depending on the trial's developments. U.S. District Judge Aaron Subramanian rejected a defense motion to delay the proceedings, ruling that the government had provided organized discovery, even if some digital records arrived later than expected. To ensure a fair process, Judge Subramanian ordered that jurors remain anonymous and partially sequestered, given the widespread media attention the case continues to attract. Before jury selection began, the judge referenced Combs' history of stage names, quipping that the list of aliases nearly matched the length of the jury questionnaire.
You still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
In the criminal case, no.
He projected that selecting the jury could take up to 4 days due to the defendant's public status, the delicate nature of the allegations, and a 120-question survey designed to assess social media activity and prior exposure to high-profile abuse cases. Combs entered the courthouse through a private tunnel, dressed in a navy wool suit and rimless glasses. He was granted permission to avoid standard detention attire, and the Bureau of Prisons approved a limited wardrobe list: 2 suits, 4 ties, and 1 pair of dress shoes, all to be rotated throughout the expected 8-week trial. This indictment comes after a wave of civil lawsuits filed since November 2023. Those filings accuse Combs of physical violence, psychological manipulation, and non-consensual acts that allegedly occurred during events described in court as freak-offs. Most of these civil actions are currently paused under the Federal Speedy Trial Act to prevent interference with the ongoing criminal proceedings. Public records include a federal agent's affidavit outlining surveillance footage, encrypted message transcripts, and financial records that prosecutors claim show hush payments funneled through third-party accounts. These transactions, they argue, represent overt acts that support the racketeering charge. Combs' legal team strongly disagrees. They argue that the payments were standard non-disclosure agreements common in the entertainment industry. Defense attorneys will call forensic accountants who plan to testify that the money did not originate from illegal sources and was clearly documented in financial records without attempts to conceal it. Some legal analysts see parallels between this case and the 2022 Southern District conviction of R&B singer R. Kelly, where prosecutors used a similar racketeering framework. Although rare, applying RICO statutes to public figures for alleged personal misconduct is becoming more legally accepted in certain cases. According to Loyola Law School professor Lori Levinson, charging a celebrity under RICO remains uncommon, but the strategy is gaining traction. She noted in a phone interview that the legal landscape is shifting, particularly when alleged abuses cross multiple jurisdictions. The indictment lists potential asset forfeitures, including a Holmby Hills mansion, a Long Island estate, and ownership rights to Combs' Bad Boy Records catalog. Valuation experts hired by the Justice Department estimate the total at over $140 million. At a March status hearing, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Collins told the court the prosecution would present 48 digital exhibits, 31 physical pieces of evidence, and nearly 900 pages of financial documents. She estimated the prosecution's case in chief would take 4 weeks, leaving the defense an equal window if it decided to present witnesses and evidence. Defense attorney Benjamin Brafman indicated a strategy focused on portraying the accusers as former insiders with financial motives. "We will show timelines that simply do not match the alleged coercion," he told reporters outside the courthouse. One sealed defense exhibit is said to include text messages from a principal complainant expressing thanks to Combs for changing my life and asking for guidance about a music career. Prosecutors argue those texts reveal dependency driven by manipulation, not sincere appreciation. In addition, the government plans to introduce audio from a 2019 recording session in Los Angeles, in which Combs allegedly lashed out at staff after a woman attempted to exit a private gathering. Brafman contends the audio is out of context, emotionally charged, and irrelevant to the formal charges. He has filed a motion to have it excluded from evidence. If convicted on the trafficking-related charges alone, Combs faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. Under federal law, the racketeering statute allows judges to impose consecutive sentences and authorize broad asset forfeitures. Legal analysts say these penalties aim to dismantle complex, organized criminal systems and prevent repeat abuse. A spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office released a statement emphasizing that the case intends to seek justice for survivors and ensure accountability for those accused of misusing their influence for personal benefit. Combs, seated beside his attorneys, spoke only briefly to confirm he understood the charges being brought. The trial takes place in a broader cultural moment marked by increased scrutiny of celebrities facing serious misconduct claims. This follows headline-making convictions of film executive Harvey Weinstein and socialite Ghislaine Maxwell. Advocacy groups have announced plans for daily demonstrations near the courthouse during the trial. Judge Subramanian issued an order barring amplified sound within 100 feet of the courthouse entrance to maintain decorum. Meanwhile, media analytics company Critical Mention reported over 28,000 combined television and online news references to the trial in recent weeks. Still, some observers believe the financial damage may be short-lived. They point to past controversies, like those involving Michael Jackson, where long-term streaming metrics eventually rebounded. Music rights attorney Dina Lapolte noted that labels are unlikely to take permanent action until a verdict is reached and the legal process is completed. In March, federal agents executed search warrants at Combs' properties in Los Angeles and Miami, seizing hard drives, devices, and surveillance equipment. The defense has called the search overly broad and filed a motion to suppress certain evidence. Judge Subramanian will review the motion after jury selection concludes. Prosecutors say the seized digital files include travel logs from Combs' private jet charter broker and guest lists from private nightclubs that align with timelines provided by key witnesses. Facial recognition software will reportedly be used to confirm identities of those who boarded flights on specific dates. In a related development, the Internal Revenue Service has launched a separate audit focusing on potential unreported income tied to exclusive events and private gatherings. While no tax-related charges have been filed, a sealed IRS memorandum reportedly refers to irregular cash transactions and questionable deposits. In response, Combs' public relations team released a statement calling the indictment an exaggerated portrayal of personal relationships and public work. It emphasized his charitable contributions to historically black colleges and disaster relief efforts, arguing that prosecutors are selectively ignoring a track record of philanthropy. Because the trafficking-related allegations are governed by a 10-year statute of limitations, the defense may seek to exclude certain evidence by arguing that some alleged conduct occurred outside the allowable time frame. Legal teams are preparing to challenge the timeline as a key strategy in the weeks ahead. The court also heard competing arguments over expert testimony that each side hopes to introduce. Prosecutors requested approval to call a clinical psychologist who would explain trauma bonding, a psychological phenomenon often observed in abusive relationships. Meanwhile, the defense seeks to call a music industry consultant to explain standard practices surrounding non-disclosure agreements. Judge Subramanian said he will rule on both motions before opening statements begin once the jury has been fully sworn in and seated. A sealed document, partially unsealed on Tuesday, revealed that prosecutors have subpoenaed hotel security logs from properties in Miami Beach, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. These records reportedly track the use of electronic room keys by Combs and 3 unnamed accusers on dates that align directly with incidents described in the indictment. According to Loyola Marymount law professor Lori Levinson, who is not involved in the case, the hotel logs could be extremely compelling if verified. She noted that placing both the accused and complainants in the same secured location shortly before alleged misconduct strengthens the government's timeline and evidentiary chain. The unsealed filing also revealed that the prosecution has reached immunity agreements with 2 former bodyguards. One is expected to testify about a red code protocol used at Combs-hosted parties, which allegedly involved confiscating guests' phones upon entry. The second bodyguard is prepared to testify about delivering cash-filled envelopes to undisclosed destinations. Braffman countered that these witnesses are disgruntled former employees facing unrelated gun charges. He argued that their cooperation is motivated by self-interest and will present payroll records to show they were terminated for theft-related incidents, not any internal misconduct. Judge Subramanian issued a caution to both legal teams, emphasizing that character attacks must remain within the scope of established evidentiary rules. He warned against turning cross-examinations into what he called a trial within a trial, focused more on personalities than provable facts. Meanwhile, as court proceedings continued, officers quietly escorted potential jurors through a separate entrance. This was done to avoid the crowd of demonstrators gathered outside the courthouse. Advocacy group Silence Breakers held signs reading "Justice for Survivors," adding to the growing public spotlight on the unfolding case. A digital banner now appears during streaming platforms whenever a Combs song plays, directing listeners to ongoing news coverage. Bad Boy Records has declined to comment. Financial analysts warn that Combs' income may take a hit if streaming services demote his catalog. However, history shows potential for recovery if he's acquitted. After R. Kelly's 2022 conviction, his monthly listeners dropped 19% over 6 weeks, but partially rebounded later. Meanwhile, the Internal Revenue Service formally notified the court that it may pursue a restitution claim if Combs is convicted. This relates to a parallel audit into unreported income connected to so-called freak-off events. Although no tax-related charges appear in the current indictment, prosecutors indicated that a superseding filing remains a possibility depending on the audit's findings. Judge Subramanian also ruled that any future civil settlements involving Combs and alleged victims must be disclosed under seal. The aim is to prevent any potential influence on witnesses or intimidation attempts during the course of the trial. To limit spectacle in the courtroom, the judge confirmed that there will be no cameras allowed. Instead, proceedings will be documented through sketches. Courtroom artist Elizabeth Williams will submit daily illustrations for public distribution under a pool arrangement. In a sealed sidebar, federal marshals testified that increased online threats prompted enhanced courthouse security. However, they assured the court that Combs faces no credible threat while inside the secured facility. With jury selection expected to continue into Wednesday, attorneys are preparing to speed up the remaining voir dire process. Judge Subramanian warned both sides that delaying tactics will result in reduced recess time, stating clearly that court resources are not unlimited. As of now, 9 jurors have been approved, with further questioning scheduled. Rulings on expert testimony are expected shortly, and opening statements are tentatively set for May 12th. If you found this update helpful and want to stay informed on the latest developments in the trial, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. This case is far from over.